I spend a lot of time looking at watches on Instagram, YouTube, and other forums and discussion groups, but for some reason, DuFrane seems to have slipped under my radar for a long time, as I only discovered them recently and by accident. DuFrane is a microbrand based out of Austin, Texas, and was founded by Stephen Lee in 2016. Today I'll be looking at the City Limits GMT, which is a music-inspired watch that has playful aesthetics. I like that DuFrane isn't afraid to throw a little color into the mix with their watch designs, and I like the overall design approach of not taking itself too seriously. This watch retails at around $899, which is among the more affordable automatic GMT watches currently on the market. This is the Silver Haze variant, which has a stainless steel case and a purplish blue dial. Let's check out the case. The case measures in at 42mm in diameter, 47.6mm from lug to lug, and just under 13mm in height. The 42mm case is well balanced with a 22mm lug width. The short and angle lugs allow the case to have a shorter lug to lug width, which is pretty cool considering the majority of 42mm watches I've seen are closer to 50mm from lug to lug. Most of the case is brushed, however there are polished accents throughout. The lugs are slender and I like the way they extend out of the case. The lugs are drilled through, which means strap changing is a breeze. The bezel fits neatly within the case diameter and is adequately easy to grip, but I think it could have been slightly better with deeper ridges along the edge. The bezel has a blue anodized aluminum insert, and one of the interesting design choices is the narrow width of the bezel. Since it's a GMT bezel, I like these dimensions as they allow the dial to take center stage. The bezel has a fraction of a millimeter worth of backplay, but this is a GMT bezel, so it's really not a problem. The action on this 24-click bezel is heavy, and each click feels solid. The polished and signed crown is well proportioned and screws down into the case. One of the few issues I have with this watch is the way the crown screws into the case. It takes a few tries to get the threads to catch, and then it's easy right until the last few turns, which require a bit more effort because of the slightly slippery crown ridges. But it does screw down perfectly with no gaps between the crown and case. Flipping it over, you have an exhibition caseback that is radially brushed with a few specifications and text engraved onto it. I like that the font used on the engravings is the same as that used on the hour numerals and bezel markers. Overall, I think the finishing on this case is good. There are a few areas where the brushed and polished surfaces meet that I think could be slightly better, but they've attempted quite a challenging design for lug and case integration, so polishing this looks like it requires much care. This watch, like the rest of DuFrane's collection, is inspired by the city of Austin. This particular watch is inspired by music, and the name City Limits is a throwback to the Austin City Limits. If you notice, the font used on the hour markers, bezel markers, and the caseback are a throwback to the above. With a narrow bezel and a 42mm case diameter, you're left with a very large dial. The dial is designed to give the appearance of a vinyl record with its concentric rings and shallow ridges. I think this is a really cool throwback without being cheesy or cliche. There is a narrow elevated chapter ring that is the same color as the dial. It is marked by loomed white triangles and circular dot markers and aligns perfectly with the dial and bezel. There is a date window at the 3 o'clock position that has a black date wheel and white font. At the 6 o'clock position, you have Swiss caliber printed on the edge of one of the vinyl rings. I like it, but my OCD makes me wish it was centered along the ring and not offset. The quality of the printing on the dial is good, and I couldn't find any faults here. The hour numerals are loomed and printed on the concentric rings. Again, this must have been challenging to do correctly since it cuts through the rings. The font is similar to that used by Austin City Limits and is a really neat way of executing a throwback. The 4 primary hour markers are larger than the rest, but not by a lot. Given the somewhat expansive surface area of the dial, it's easy to fall victim to too much empty space, but this watch manages to balance it reasonably well. The hour and minute hands are generously loomed. They are finished well, and I couldn't find any issues on the surfaces or edges. The seconds hand is painted orange, and the circular counterbalance is filled with loom. I'm not a huge fan of loomed counterweights as they aren't really functional, but it does look cool at night. There is a skeletonized GMT hand with the loomed filled arrowhead. The yellowish-orange loom matches the rest of the orange accents perfectly. I think the choice of hands is simple but perfect for the somewhat unorthodox dial design. The loom on this watch is great. All the hands are clearly legible, and the loomed elements on the chapter ring look great as well. the loomed numerals are clearly visible, and the entire set of loomed elements hold their glow reasonably well. I have no complaints, so I'll just leave you with this clip. This watch uses a Sellita SW330 GMT movement. Thanks to the exhibition case pack, you get to appreciate the DuFrane engraved rotor that is finished with Geneva stripes. I logged the accuracy of this watch over a 4-day period and observed an average accuracy of minus 2.6 seconds per day. This is very impressive and is likely to be the best regulated Sellita watch I've reviewed so far. Under my macro lens, I did find a tuft of dust suspended on the movement. These things happen more often than not, but could creep into delicate parts of the movement and create trouble at some point. The 42mm diameter is larger than what I typically wear on my 6¼ inch wrist, but the 48mm lug-to-lug width allows it to wear quite nicely, even on smaller wrists such as mine. The dial is mostly what is visible, so it does appear like a large watch, but it doesn't feel that way on the wrist. The 13mm height isn't bad at all, and I actually found it quite comfortable. The watch ships with 2 straps. One of them is the blue silicone that you see here. As with most silicone straps, it is extremely comfortable and is what I chose to wear during my review. But the more interesting strap is the gaucho style leather strap made by Barton watch bands, and both come with stamped stainless steel buckles. This is a very unique strap, quite loud in terms of design, but definitely unlike anything I've seen before. To wrap things up, I think this is a really fun watch that has tons of personality. The build quality is good, and the price tag is quite appealing if you're looking for a GMT watch in particular. There's not too many GMT watches in the sub $1,000 category, and even fewer that have attempted to deliver more than just a cost-effective watch. DuFrane has put much thought into both the design of the watch and the ownership experience. I will admit that the overall aesthetic is not for everybody, but no watch is, and nor should they be. There's a lot to like about the City Limits GMT, and I'll go ahead and say that I'm a fan. If your collection is missing a colorful, casual watch to wear when traveling, this is worth considering. Thanks for watching, and be sure to read the full review in the link below.